Well, hey there, you're on the internet, I have some free time, and welcome to the Triple N Network, where all you newbie nip nerds can find all the news you'll need. Let's look at an ink today, shall we? Now, today's ink, I have in sample form, and it was requested that I test it, and I happen to have it, so here we are. It's by Diamine, Umber, which is green. And I can't really explain that, because every time I've ever heard anything referred to as Umber, it was not even remotely green. But who knows, I could be wrong. Or every art supply I've ever bought named Umber could be wrong. Yeah. Cool. Two pens I used were these. This is a Parker Vector with a fine nib, and these pens tend to be a little bit dry. So, and this one is a tiny bit, so that's my moderate pen. And I also use this JinHao X450. And I love my 450s because they tend to be pretty broad and pretty wet, and this one most certainly is. Okay, thought I'd see what might be even marginally related to this. So here's Umber, and here's Ackermann's 26 Grunmarketsmarkt. I just massacred that. I apologize to every Dutch person ever. Noodler's V-Mail GI Green, which has a little bit more yellow in it, I guess. And then we've also got Noodlers for Dromgool's Texas Live Oak, which is, as you can tell, darker and woollier. And lastly, Diatramentus Edgar Allan Poe, which is just a bit lighter and maybe has just a little bit more yellow in it. So, yeah. Now, I thought I'd see what this ink could stand up to. And honestly, the answer is not much. So, here's water. And water pretty much destroyed it. Here's bleach, and bleach made it look like it was never even there. Ammonia pen flush really broke it up. It was really on its way out. And hydrogen peroxide really kicked its butt. So, yeah. Now, let's check out the chromatography. And admittedly, my camera's doing this weird thing with this shade of green because it's actually more of a bluish green. It's more of a like aquish seafoamy green, and the camera can't handle that apparently. But yeah, as you can see, this is how you're supposed to do it. You can see the dot where it was initially put. It's a sort of a light brown. You get some brown going up, and then you get into this green, and then you get a little bit of a darkness up at the top. Here's where I let it dry, which is not how you're supposed to do it. You can see the dot got darker. There's a bit less of that brown. The green is a bit lighter, and you don't have those spots of dark haze up at the top. Okay, paper test. Top down in density, Clairefontaine, 90 grams per square meter. Hold this still so you can get a look. And, yeah. For some reason I had some trouble with this. I think this was one of the last pages from this little Sayas notebook that I had. Because, yeah, it did some things that I was not expecting. And it probably shouldn't have. But, yeah, so the fine vector took 7 seconds. The broad and wet JinHao only took 12, so that's not bad. You definitely get some shading. However, there are these weird spots of feathering and sort of a woolliness, and I can't really explain it, and it's not everywhere, which is part of what makes me think this is from the back of the notebook. Because I mean, you don't really get bleed, and you don't really get show through, but there's, I don't know, it's just a feeling I have. Generally, the pages from the back of a notebook are a stack of, like a block of Rhodia. For some reason, the deeper into it I get, once I'm at like the last 10 pages or so, the performance starts to get a little wonky. But yeah, here, very, very well behaved overall. No real feathering, no bleed, no spread. There's really no echo. However, I hope this will come through. I feel like this ink could use just a bit more saturation. I mean, here where it's at its darkest, where it's at its wettest, you don't really see those lines so much, but I mean, where it's thinnest, you can find even thin lines. So, yeah. I feel like I could use just a little more ink in this ink, but yeah. And this was the other reason I thought this was from the back of the notebook. You get patchy, not all of it staying, dyed the page, but it also feathered and exploded. It usually doesn't do that. But yeah. Now, next up is Fabriano Paper, which I have come to love, and can often handle inks that Rhodia or Clairefontaine can't handle quite as well. And so let's just take a look at this, because that's what it did here today. Yeah, the fine vector took 6 seconds. The broad and wet JinHao only took 14. You get great shading. You get a little bit of a halo. And in fact, I know this isn't going to show up on camera, but you get this black-red sheen, like micro halo sheen in the wettest parts. And it's in the writing too. It's just usually easiest to find it in the scrubby. Here there's no feather, there's no bleed, there's no spread, there's no echo. All very well behaved there. I still feel like it can be seen here in the writing that it could use just a little more ink in this ink. But it's perfectly decent. Now here's a water test where we actually start to see some of that brown. However, most of it is completely gone. The fine is utterly gone. Parts of the broad are still there, but that's about it. Next up is Rhodia, 80 grams per square meter. Yeah, I feel like once again we can really see that undersaturation. Like we can see all the lines in the quadrilateral paper. It's it could just use a little more ink in that ink, but yeah. So the fine Parker vector took 8 seconds. The broad and wet JinHao took 17. There's again a bit of a like a micro halo in the wettest parts, which is nice. I like that. But yeah, the flow is just slightly wet. I'd say maybe a 6. Lovely shading. No feather, no spread, no bleed, no echo. Water test again did that weird thing where it kind of feathered and exploded, but that you'll notice that it is mostly right along there, which is the edge of the page. So a lot of times that happens around the edge of pages. So next up is Tomoe River, which is a cream paper. It's known for bringing out shading and dry times and sheen, and it most certainly did. There was a pretty significant jump in dry times. The fine vector took 12, the broad and wet JinHao took 21, but hopefully this will show up on camera. We definitely get some red metallic sheen in the halo around the darkest parts. Come on, camera, please. Oh, it doesn't want to do it today, but it's there, and it's in the words as well. Very well behaved. There's a lot of shading, but I feel like here you can really see that it's just kind of undersaturated. I wish there was more ink in this ink. You see how dark it can get and how thin it can be, and that's not great. But yeah, I said that there is some echo with the broad, especially in the scrubby, because I was laying it on pretty thick and it got pretty dark. So, but again, that's always to taste, so something to be aware of. Now this paper is known for letting ink slide away when you add more water, and it most certainly did. That is so gone. I mean, the fine is just utterly gone. You can sort of see the E and the R and the dots from the broad, but that's about it. So, Now for the next 3 tests, I only used the fine vector, except to write the name. Here is the world's worst 20-pound copier paper, where we get a lot of woolliness. We get sort of a gross texture to it. Everything in red, circled in red, is feathering. Sort of the most obvious bits of feathering. And then everything that was near bleed is circled in green, and full bleed is circled in red and green. Yeah, and there's echo. I mean, you can see echo, but yeah, it's not great. I would have expected better, because I mean, this is 20-pound copier paper. This is stuff we encounter every day, and that's a fine nib, and it's very moderate. But yeah, here it's absorbent paper. It sucks the ink in, makes it harder to wash out. That's kind of what happened, but the green sort of feathered and exploded, and what is left is the brown, but it's a very light brown. You could recover that. It would not be fun. I doubt it would be fun, but yeah. Here's Mead Notebook Paper. It's physically thinner than 20-pound copier paper, and it did behave a bit better. You can see that it didn't spread as much as it did on the 20-pound copier paper. Again, everything in red here is feathering, so there is some feathering. But there's almost no bleed. So it did very well in that regard. It was definitely outperforming the 20-pound paper here. You do get a bit of a woolly effect. It still looks slightly undersaturated. It took 2 seconds to dry. And this paper hates water, so when you add water, bad things happen. And it definitely did. I mean, you can see that that green is feathering and exploding off. It just... However, I don't know, if you had to recover that, you probably could. Lastly is Moleskine notebook paper, which I hate because it hates ink. It really hates this one. This texture, I hope this comes through on camera. See that like blobbiness? It's so woolly. It's really nasty looking. For some reason it took 3.5 seconds to dry. I can't explain why, because obviously it's soaked into the paper. You know, everything red is feathering, and eventually I just gave up because there was just too much to circle. It was pretty bad. And then there was a lot of bleed, and actually a few times it rendered onto the page below. For some reason I didn't circle those specifically. I usually do that. But yeah, it was pretty bad. And this is some of the worst water tests we've seen. This is the worst water test we've seen for this ink. Because instead of the brown sort of staying still and the green exploding off, here everything exploded and feathered. It would just be a disaster. That would not be fun to recover if you could recover it at all. But yeah, there you go. There's Diamine's Umber, which is a green for reasons I can't explain. It shades wonderfully. I feel like it could use a little bit more saturation to it, but it's perfectly good ink. It could behave a little better on the cheap papers, but yeah, meh. It's alright. I'm glad I tried it. I think I'm going to stick with Sherwood, though. It's kind of similar. It's a bit darker. But yeah, that's my personal preference. It's a perfectly good ink. If you like this ink, I would love to hear why. Please leave a comment down below. For your consideration from the Triple N Network, if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe to the channel. And thanks for watching. Bye.